inches long. A solar-powered car that could actually be driven was unveiled in 1962. A 1912 Baker electric car was fitted with nearly 11,000 individual solar cells on the roof to power the vehicle. Now, 55 years on, a fully practical solar-powered car remains a goal. But manufacturing automobiles, mostly powered by internal combustion, is a $118 billion a year business in the U.S. Profile America is in its 21st year as a public service of the U.S. Census Bureau.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon, Arkansas. You are tuning in now to Union Station here on KABF 88.3 Voice of the People. I am your host, Jessica Akers Hughes with the Arkansas AFL-CIO, and today we have a call-in guest because some of us in the labor world stay super busy, and if you work for an international union, most of the time you are driving your life away. So with us today, we have Mr. Robert Harrison. Are you there, Robert?
Yes, I am, Jessica. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Busy as always.
Busy as always. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for calling in and joining us today. Sometimes with this radio station, that's what I run into sometimes is finding people that are in town and available. Available to speak on a Monday with our listeners, right? So I definitely appreciate you. I know that you are somewhat on vacation, so thank you.
That's not a problem. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, excellent. So, guys, as you all know, this is Union Station. We are here every Monday at 4:30 to talk all things workers, labor, people, politics, economy, because they're all interrelated, all of them. And so, Robert, if you can hear me, I'm going to start out sometimes to do this for our listeners. This day in labor history. So this day in labor history, guys, in 1970, the NFL Players Association had their first ever 2-day strike, and then found got off strike and came up with an agreement. But the NFL went on a 2-day strike, 1970, on this day. Also on this day in labor history, a little bit larger piece of labor history was the Great Shipyard Strike of 1999. And this was with the steel workers at Newport News Shipbuilding went on strike. It was a 15-week strike. That is about 4 months, guys. And they ratified, at the end of it, one of the best and strongest agreements that they ever had at that company, and they covered 10,000 workers at that shipyard. So, little piece of history for you guys. I always try to bring in labor history. I think Robert would agree. Labor history is important, and I think it's more important today than ever, as so many people entering the workforce for the past 30 years didn't either witness or be part of kind of that initial, struggle that unions fought so hard for.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on that. I think a lot of people will take for granted the rights and benefits they have and don't realize the struggle that was entailed to get those benefits. So yeah, that's where we are right now.
Well, and absolutely, and Robert, I don't fault people for not knowing. The little conspiracy person in me says maybe that is by design, because I know labor history wasn't in my textbooks growing up in Memphis. So why is it left out? I don't know. I don't think it does anything to build a stronger workforce. What about you?
Actually, I think it's by the people who control the textbooks, that write the textbooks, where they're getting their funding from, what they value as being important. I mean, we recently saw in Texas where, for example, slaves were renamed happy guest workers. It would be the concept of point of view.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so it just interesting. And, like I said, there's a little bit of a conspiracy theorist in me.
A lot of it is also political also.
Yes, absolutely.
As we look at the differences between the different political parties not taking sides, some are more conservative, so the viewpoint is more conservative and more what they say more right-leaning, and then others, we have Democratic entities and school bodies, they may be a little bit more left-leaning, and it reflects in the school system what we teach our kids.
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. So for our listeners, Robert has been on our show before. I can't wait to actually have him come into the office again. I think he's called in a couple of times for me. But Robert is a representative for the American Federation of Government Employees. And Robert, tell, if you could, just every time you're on, I ask you to do this, could you break down the types of people that AFGE, the Federation of Government Employees, what workers y'all represent?
Basically, we're up over 700,000 federal employees, excluding the Treasury Service. They're represented by National Treasury Union. We represent everybody from the U.S. Marshals, Federal Protective Agencies, VA, the Veterans Administration, EPA, Environmental Protective Agency, FDA, DOD workers, military defense contractors, Social Security workers. So we cover the full gamut of government. Most of the services that really affect the people in Arkansas also.
Absolutely.
Especially your Farm Service Bureau, Small Business Association, things that directly affect people in the loans and the production of agricultural products in Arkansas, which is a major factor in our rice production, beans and corn.
Yeah, farming is very, very crucial for this state. And, with that being said, as much as, people and they say business and farms don't want regulations, I think the EPA and FDA and USDA are very, very critical agencies of our government that, people sometimes take for granted. And yes, you may not be able to use something on your crops or in your farm, but you and I and our listeners can go to the grocery store and assume, except for some instances, that we can buy food and we're not going to get sick, right?
That would be one aspect of it, but other aspect of it is not well known is each agency is interrelated, and the funding for each agency and the budget may come from another agency's budget. For example, the Agricultural Department gets money and gives out farm grants. The farm grants affect water and flood abatement programs that affect the money that goes into the levee program in Arkansas. So your flood relief, it comes from the Corps of Engineers, but they get that grant to the Department of Agriculture. So when we look at cuts to the budget, a lot of people don't realize, even though you cut one department, the downstream of where the money comes from for the other programs that affect our farming, land grants, and loan programs could also be cut. There's a direct relationship between not the name of the agency, but the funding streams, the funding sources.
Okay, so speaking of funding, this was actually going to be my second point of business, but you led me into the direction that let's talk about funding, because I know that federal funding goes so many places and does so many things, and I couldn't imagine what all that I am involved with daily that has some federal money in it. But as far as, let's talk workforce first. As far as the workforce goes, as far as your membership goes, what are y'all looking at moving forward with funding and budgets coming out of D.C.?
Actually, the proposed budget as it stands now proposes a $59 billion cut in domestic spending for social programs and domestic programs. That's the funding for your Social Security Administration, Medicare, Medicaid. It's going to affect the health system programs, shrinking the VA. But these cuts are going to mainly affect working class people.
I was
Well,
going to
while these
ask you
cuts-
that these cuts, we so often when the average Joe hears about, budget cuts and we're going to cut budgets from, the VA and Social Security Administration, they're cutting people's jobs out, correct? I mean, beyond the actual money given out through, a Social Security check or, VA benefits, these are, in addition to the patient or the recipient, these are jobs.
But the cuts don't only affect the federal employees, but the other entities that receive the federal money. For example, they're going to cut federal employees' pay with this budget approximately 6%.
They're going to cut in federal employees what? I'm sorry.
Pay.
Pay.
6%.
Okay. They're getting a pay cut.
Essentially, because they're charging them more for their retirement, and they're freezing their cost of living adjustments forever. There will no longer be any cost of living adjustments if this particular budget passes. But this also affects your retirees. So whatever they retired at, no matter what the inflationary issues are that occur, their monetary value of their money will be capped. They will never get any more increases.
Now, and nothing will change that. Can the House and Senate give them cost of living adjustments?
According to the way this bill stands, it gets rid of COLA, it gets rid of cost of living adjustment. This also affects your veterans. They won't receive cost of living adjustments in their benefits. And it would also extend back to the proposal that came out last year where they tried to cap the Social Security benefits so they wouldn't have a cost of living increase to our seniors.
Oh, my gosh.
So we're very cautious about what's happening with this particular bill, but people are going to have to call in their senators and representatives and tell them that the government should be fully funded and they don't want pay cuts and they don't want their benefits capped.
Absolutely. So, this is going to ask people, though. And this is a question that just out of the air I come up with. If they want to keep what they have, if we don't want these cuts, what is the answer to what should be cut? What do you say cut instead? Does that make sense?
Well, we're increasing the military budget by $59 billion. This is a direct proportion to the cuts they're making in social spending. The biggest issue is, these cuts, we already have the world's largest defense budget. The last stats I saw put out by USA Today and Forbes said that the next largest militaries, the next 8 largest militaries, don't have the budget equal to what we spend yearly on defense.
Oh, yeah, I knew that our military spending was
We're not opposed to a strong defense. Don't get me wrong, the union has no problem with a strong defense.
Oh, yes.
Be strong.
Yes, I know. But
I refer back to Winston Churchill. When London was going through the crisis during World War II, and they asked Churchill, are we going to keep funding the arts? Then Churchill's response was, then what are we fighting for? And I think that's what we're coming akin to. Having social programs, how we take care of our elderly and our children, should be directly responsive to what our budget is and where our values are.
Absolutely.
So now throw that out there.
Okay. Yeah, I just, that's always going to be kind of the question that comes back at you, right? People will say we need to cut government spending, or that it's out of control, or any of these, kind of sound bites that we hear. And, government spends how it sees fit. I don't always agree with it. But, these services that we talk about and the people that provide them, right? I think you and I have talked about it before. When you cut Social Security Administration costs, you're not cutting the big bureaucracy out of D.C. You're cutting the offices here in Little Rock and the people that are already short-staffed. You're taking away from...
I would say that's part of it, Jessica, because one of the other issues is Social Security is not entitlement. Medicare is not entitlement. That's your tax dollars. You pay that out of every check you earn when you're working. Mm-hmm. There's a 6.8% tax on your take-home income that goes directly to your Social Security. That's not entitlement. You've been paying that.
Well, shouldn't they, and this is just me thinking out loud, that being said, shouldn't the administration cost of Social Security, shouldn't that be a pretty easy thing to budget out several years into the future?
You would think, but Washington, the money's only nominal. They don't actually spend real money. They're just on a piece of paper where they move things around and propose a budget. But really, I would say Congress has the obligation of allocating the funding, but it depends on what their values are. And right now, the value appears to be the military more so than it is domestic and social services spending.
Yeah. Well, and we need all of it, right? I'm not saying we can do without one or the other. Just, for people that might want to call their congressmen or senators, just some extra talking points for them. I do want to talk about, though, we talked about, when you said, we talked about funding, you did mention the VA.
Yes,
guys,
ma'am.
the VA is Veterans Affairs. I'm saying V as in Victor. The VA provides medical services, and I'm sure more than, to veterans. I'm sure with, from what I hear and read, with war going on for how many years now?
Almost 13 years.
13? Okay, for 13 years, I'm sure the amount of traffic going through the VA is only increasing. You often, hear about the VA in the news or things of that. And while I was doing my background, my little backgrounder for today's show, I saw the article about the Little Rock VA nurses, Robert, that the VA nurses actually had an action, a informational picket or something of that nature, and filed a complaint with the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Inspector General of Veterans Affairs, and the State Board of Nursing, because they were down 150 nurses. Tell me do you know about that? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, I can. Actually, that nursing action was brought about by AFG Local 2054, President Barbara Casanova over there. And working with the agency, they noticed at the agency that there were 159 nursing positions down. And the nurses' concerns were the impact on their ability to service the veterans. And one of the proposals that came up from administration was to actually shut down almost 80 beds at the VA in Little Rock.
Oh, wow.
Yes, which will give us less capacity to service our veterans.
And do they usually, and this is just out of curiosity, are they pretty busy all the time?
They are pretty busy.
Okay.
We haven't seen a decrease in our patient load over there, and I don't know the exact patient load, but they haven't seen a decrease in their patient load in the services they provide the veterans. Mm-hmm. And that's what some of the concerns are. We hear constantly on TV how the Veteran Administration is broke, but the problem is not that it's broke; it's just not funded completely. As AFG has said on many occasions and spoke with the Secretary Shokin, there are almost 50,000 positions unfilled in the VA.
Yeah, I was reading that. I was, read that they're down just, 49,000 nurses nationwide. I could imagine, looking beyond just nurses, that number has to be astonishing.
But the administration says the system is broke. If you don't fully fund it and fully put care providers in the system can't accomplish its mission.
Well, so I have a question. And this is probably digging a little too deep for radio, but now, are the positions funded, or are they just not filled? Or is it both?
They're not filled and not fully funded.
Okay.
The last VA budget that I actually was year before last, they were $390 million short.
Ooh.
That was known when the budget was passed.
Okay.
They were already $390 million short.
That's a big chunk of money.
So if you don't fully fund it and you don't fully staff it, they can't really fulfill their services. And the funny thing about it, the wait times of the VA usually compared to the wait times of the civilian market. The VA really gets a bad rap but they don't. Nobody goes to work at the VA to kill vets. And the one issue that has come up recently is the Veterans Accountability Act, where they've taken away some of the rights of veterans, the employers that work at the VA, to file grievances. And it made it easier to terminate people. But the accountability is always at the lower level. They don't really discipline their management.
Yeah.
And that's been our big issue. We want accountability. We want good workers. But the problem is, if you have a director making mistakes and the director's not doing their job adequately, firing a janitor is not going to solve the problem.
Absolutely. That brings me to you. Last week, guys, we were part of the Arkansas Labor Management Conference. It's a unique conference helped put on by the Federal Mediation Services, but it brings management and labor together to talk about, things that they have in common and how, best practices. And Robert, it sounds like the VA system, and especially, the ones that are decision makers, they need to go to a labor management retreat and look, the heads of the department should want, the good service, good quality nurses, and to give good treatment to veterans. Well, what do the people that work there want? And profit isn't even a part of the equation because it's not a privatized service yet. So,
not yet, but there is a move to privatize it, Jessica, and that's what we're scared of. Right now, Veterans Health Care and the Veteran Administration makes decisions on the treatment of the veteran based on the health needs or the medical necessity for that veteran. We're very worried about it being privatized and made to be akin to an HMO system where there's a cost analysis on whether the veteran gets that care or not.
Oh,
It's a very scary prospect because there are those entities out there that want to take over the VA for profit. And they're not there for the care of the veteran. They're looking at the bottom line.
Yeah. Well, and sadly enough, when people think of this privatization, they scream, smaller government. Yeah, I believe in smaller government in places. One place I do not believe in smaller government is taking care of our veterans. And I believe it should be the government's program. I should believe that it should stay under that for, more than this reason, but it should never be to make a company or shareholders or insurance companies rich off of caring for veterans. So, the idea to privatize veterans care, I don't think privatization's the answer. I look at what the system that we have and look at where it needs to be, tweaked or whatnot, but don't try to reinvent the wheel under, and try to turn a profit.
Well, Jessica, to be honest with you, I'm not only a representative of the workers of the VA. I'm a client. I'm 17-year veteran of the military, and I'm a client. I use the VA services.
Sorry, you made me think of that hair club commercial. I'm just going to throw that out there. But please continue.
Right now in our community, we don't have adequate mental health services to service the regular community. It's just not out there. So if we're talking about taking veterans, and we've been in war for approximately the last 13 years, plus the veterans from all wars before that who suffered PTSD and other military unique type illnesses and disabilities. I don't know, since we can't service the regular community, what are we going to do with these vets if we shut down our VA system? The community system can't even accomplish its primary goal right now, and to dump another 100,000, 200,000, or millions of veterans on that system, I just don't think it's a setup for failure.
Well, in our healthcare, look at where we are with healthcare. It's up in the air. So I think, especially, not saying it should ever be, but you look at this timing. Especially the timing. Our healthcare system's up in the air and in flux, and we don't have many answers. The last thing we need to do is try to change the VA system as well. Wouldn't you? That
I agree
sounds
with
like
you
a
totally.
perfect storm.
Well, we actually have a perfect storm because the last bill that was luckily defeated by the Senate to get rid of the ACA, or colloquially named Obamacare, was that bill was going to actually affect people that have employer-based health care. It was going to affect people who already have health care through their employer, making our premiums go up and taking away some of our health care options. So there are a lot of things going on with health care right now that I think every worker needs to really be aware of.
Absolutely. We had Tony Orr and I talked about healthcare a lot last week, and this was before the infamous McCain thumbs down at 2 o'clock in the morning this weekend. But healthcare is important for all humans, and I think the healthcare for our veterans is owed, for a lack of better words, it is owed to them. and shame on anyone to try to make a profit off of it. And I know the VA gets a bad rap, and I know that those nurses care so much about their patients, and I know quite a few people close to me that have suffered with PTSD, and it is real and it is scary. And anything we can do here to get the word out about the VA or their nurses, or anything that is really coming down that you're working on that will affect our communities, we want to know.
Well, I say right now the biggest thing is with the current budget to cut the federal workforce, to try to get, and I want to point this out, federal workers have over the last 8 to 10 years contributed over $189 billion to deficit reduction through pay cuts, freezes, increases in contribution toward retirement, lessen the burden on government. No other sector of the community has contributed as much to deficit reduction. The problem that we see is, and I guess it's a fundamental issue, is that the government provides services to people. And these services include giving loans out to businesses, giving loans out to farms, regulating clean water, clean air. And most people get these services, don't even realize these are government programs.
Exactly.
So when you make cuts to the workforce to provide these services, the services still exist and the American people still want these services, but the services have to be given. Somebody has to do the work. Somebody has to process it. Somebody has to do these inspections. I don't think most people understand or know how much the government affects their daily life.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you start getting rid of the workers who perform the services have to suffer.
Well, and that's the unfortunate part, is that, the worker bees that make this happen, that take care of, your Social Security check problems, that take care of, your dad who's a veteran, who take care of, your disability. All of these things are provided by people that are going to be affected by a cut in the budget.
We have almost 15,000 federal employees in the state of Arkansas. These are 15,000 people who work in your community, pay taxes, that are your neighbors.
And I don't consider them really big government. They are providing services.
But when these cuts take place and they cut the budget and they cut these jobs, those are the people who are affected. The money is still out there. The money is still allocated by the government to do this. All they're doing is getting rid of people who do the jobs.
Well, and then crying that nothing's working. Poor service.
Well, if you starve it and it doesn't work, whose fault is it?
Oh, yeah. I completely agree. Too often I have seen instances where things are set up to fail, if you so wish. If you set it up and do things in order to, ensure its failure, or like you said, starve it to death, it's going to go away.
And these are not political issues, Jessica, and that's the one point of this. It's not Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter about a political party. These are services, and these are America's people. And the federal workforce works for America's people. We don't work for an agency, and no government agency works to turn a profit. All the government agencies and the people who work at those agencies do is service the American people in one form or another. That's who they work for.
Amen, Robert.
They're the people who take care of America's people. That's all they are. The federal workforce are the people who service America's people. That's all they do.
Absolutely.
It's not for profit, and that's what it is.